There are things that we swallow and don't go down. They stay there, squeezed between pride and shame, between what should have been said and what was kept hidden out of fear. My name is Anselmo. I'm 83 years old, and only now have I found the strength to speak. My whole life I've been called a strong man, a hard worker, a devoted father, but no one ever knew what was behind my silence. No one ever realized that every day for 40 years I drank cold coffee alone in the kitchen, waiting for a phone call that never came, a truth that was never told, and the smell of coffee was strong, just like her way of being. Bitter, just like the way I felt when I lay down next to someone I loved more than myself, without knowing that she had already given my place to another man, and that man was the neighbor. For years I opened the gate and said good morning to him as if he were my brother. He helped in the garden, brought candy to the children, smiled with a cynicism that today makes my stomach turn just remembering it, and I thought I was lucky to have a family, to see my son running around the yard, to hear Daddy coming from that little mouth that was my pride. I believed everything, in every word she said, in every caress she gave me in a rush, in every excuse to go out in the afternoon. And I kept believing, until the last day, until that cold hospital where she, with her eyes heavy with guilt and her voice broken, whispered to me something I never imagined I would hear. Daniel isn't yours. He's Roberto's son. And the world didn't fall apart with a bang. It fell apart with silence. A silence that made my chest hurt like never before. I didn't cry. I didn't hit anything. I only felt the taste of the blood that runs inside when we bite down on the pain to keep from screaming. She died 2 days later, and I stayed. I stayed with the truth in my hands, alone in the same room where I dreamed of old age by her side, where now all that remained was her. Perfume impregnated on the pillow. Sometimes we only start to die when we stop telling the truth, and it was in that silence that everything started to fall apart, even though no one saw it, because no one saw what I felt when I hugged Daniel and saw the face of my neighbor in him. No one saw what it was like to live for 4 decades pretending nothing had happened, keeping a secret that she left me as an inheritance before she died. And even so, I loved that boy, as if he were mine, as if he had come out of me, because deep down, the love I gave was real, even though the story never was. I almost didn't have the courage to tell this, and I spent decades swallowing this truth like someone swallowing a stone, afraid of being judged, or worse, ignored. There are times when we speak just to see if someone really listens, you know? Not to be right, just so we don't die in silence. So, it shows that I'm not talking to myself. Leave your like, and stay with me until the end, because what I still need to tell is perhaps the part that hurts the most. And subscribe, because there are stories that I have kept for too long, and now I just want to share this burden with someone. Some people remember the first time they saw the sea. I remember the first time I saw her smile, Marina, name of a saint, face of silence, and a beautiful sadness in her eyes, the kind that only those who have suffered a lot can carry without spilling it. There was no noise that day, just the sound of my footsteps on the stone sidewalk, the dry crackling of the leaves falling from the rose apple tree in the square, and that blue dress of hers swaying slowly in the wind. I can't say what attracted me first, whether it was the way she tied her hair lazily or the way she avoided looking directly at me as if she was afraid of being seen too much. But it was there. It was at that exact moment that my chest made a strange noise, as if life was calling me to start over. I wasn't a man who spoke beautifully or knew what to say. I had just turned 23, worked at Mr. Raoul's brickyard, and every day I returned to a borrowed room with a crooked mattress and an old Bible on the nightstand. But that day, that Sunday at Mass, my feet walked without my telling them to. I went to her. I asked her something silly, anything, just to hear her voice. She answered with a maybe that echoed inside me for days. The kind of voice that seems to carry secrets you don't tell. You just feel them, We started talking by chance, a good morning at the bakery, then a ride in the rain with my torn umbrella, then a walk along the river. It was never a movie crush. It was something more petty, more real. Marina was the kind of person who spoke softly, thought loudly, and loved in silence. And I, who was always trying to be a man of the world, became a boy just by touching her hand. When I asked her to marry me, my voice was shaking so much that it almost didn't come out. She said yes without smiling, but with her eyes shining in a way that made me believe that yes wasn't enough. We got married with little, almost nothing. A thin ring, a borrowed dress, a priest in a hurry, and a cake made by the neighbor. But I swear to you, that day I felt like a king, king of a small castle with a tin roof and a creaky door, but full of future. With her, everything seemed lighter. I thought I had finally made it in life, that after so much absence, so much abandonment in childhood, I had built my own roots, a home. The room was cramped, but my heart was wide. Marina liked to leave the window open at night to listen to the crickets. She said it was the most sincere sound on earth. I liked to watch her sleep, to hear her deep breathing, the kind that only those who are at peace can have. And I thought she was. I thought we were. Life went on. I woke up early. The cold cut my soul. But I went. Working with clay, carrying weight, chopping wood, collecting wood. Chips. I did it all laughing because I knew that at the end of the day I would go back to her. The house was simple, but it was ours. The first thing we bought together was a wood stove. I remember the smell of burning wood mixed with the smell of beans cooked the day before. I thought that was happiness. Then Daniel came along, my first child. My world turned upside down. I remember the night she told me she was pregnant. The candle was almost out, and the rain was beating lightly on the roof. She held my hand tightly, her eyes filled with tears, and said, "I think there's someone growing inside me." That someone became my everything. I began to live for both of them. I made promises to heaven and earth. I promised that I would never let anything go unnoticed, that I would be a real father and husband, that I would break the cycle of abandonment that my father left behind, that I would never make my family feel the emptiness that I felt. The pregnancy was difficult. Marina felt very nauseous. Sometimes she cried for no reason. She would stare out the window as if she were waiting for someone to come back. I told her it was the hormones, the bad weather, the changes. I helped her as much as I could. I heated water for her to wash her feet. I made her coffee with sweet milk the way she liked it. I made up stories to make her laugh. But sometimes she didn't laugh. She would just sit there with her eyes half lost, her hand on her belly, in a never-ending silence. I pretended not to see, because sometimes it's easier to believe that everything is okay than to accept that something is wrong. Daniel was born on a cold morning. The midwife arrived late, and I was shaking more than she was. When he cried for the first time, something inside me settled down, as if everything finally made sense. I took that boy in my arms and cried. I cried like a child. Marina looked at me and smiled. And in that smile, for the first time, there was peace. In the early years, life revolved. Around him, cloth diapers, warm milk, and crying in the middle of the night. Marina was a devoted mother. I was an enchanted father. I would come home from work and go straight to his crib. I would tell him stories, make faces, pick him up and say to him, "You're going to be better than your father, my son, much better." And I believed that with all my heart. But sometimes I felt a strange chill, a small discomfort, like an itch that couldn't be reached. When she took too long to come back from the market. When the neighbor said good morning too often. When she avoided my gaze for too long. But I pushed it down. "Nonsense, Anselmo," I told myself. "She loves you. You're a family." Because that's what I wanted to believe. That love was greater, that love was enough. Maybe I loved too much, maybe I trusted too much, maybe I just wanted to believe that the world wouldn't be cruel to me again, that God, after beating me so much, would finally let me be happy. But sometimes life holds certain truths where we least expect them. There were days when I couldn't even remember what my own face looked like. All I could see was clay on my hands, calluses on my fingers, and that tiredness that doesn't make you sleepy. It makes you silent. I would wake up before the rooster crowed in a bone-chilling cold, and I would walk to the pottery. The dirt floor, the smoke from the kiln, the smell of hot clay sticking to my nose, the constant noise of the shovels, the shouts of the men, the crackle of the fire cracking the clay. All of this became part of me. When someone asked me, "Is everything okay?" I would say, "I'm going," and keep going, because I didn't have time to think about pain. I only had time to make it work. I carried stones on my back, built walls and piled bricks until my vision went black. But when I returned home, even with my back stiff and my fingers throbbing, all I had to do was see Daniel running in the yard and Marina lighting the lantern, and something in me would settle down. She was a good housewife, I never denied that. She knew how to make salt bread that smelled like childhood and kept everything clean as if it was sacred. There were days when I would come home and she would already have her apron dirty with flour, her hair tied up with a blue scarf, and her voice was tired but sweet. "Sit down, Anselmo. Your dish is ready." And I sat down, because that was what I wanted most in the world. To eat with my family, to see my son covered in beans, to listen to the radio playing an old song in the background. Was there anything better? But you know what's strange? Even in the middle of this seemingly perfect routine, sometimes I felt an emptiness. I can't explain it. It was like a chill that came out of nowhere. I looked at her and saw the same smile as always, but inside, it felt like something there didn't belong to me. A look that avoided mine, a rush for no reason, a gesture that was too rehearsed. She did everything right, but sometimes the rightness is what scares her the most. I remember one night in particular. The rain was beating down hard on the roof, and I had arrived early. She wasn't expecting me. She was on the porch, sitting on the wooden bench, picking at her nails as if she was trying to kill time. I walked in slowly, not wanting to scare her. When she saw me, she smiled, but it was too quick. One of those smiles that seem like an obligation. I went in, hung up my coat, and she followed me in a hurry, saying she was going to make some coffee. I didn't ask anything. I just stood there, standing in the hallway, listening to the sound of the kettle, the clink of the spoon in the cup, and the silence between one noise and the next. Maybe it was just tiredness. Maybe it was just my head. But after that, I started to understand details. Small ones, discreet ones. A torn note in the trash, a wilted flower hidden at the bottom of the sink, a washed piece of clothing that wasn't ours. Nothing that proved anything, but everything that made me think too much. But men don't think, right? Men keep things, swallow them, pretend. And I did. Because my biggest fear was losing what I fought so hard to build, because we prefer to believe in a pretty lie than to face the truth that destroys. So I continued, like every man does. I worked like a beast of burden. I sweated, scraped my fingers, and shut my chest. There were nights when I slept without eating. There were mornings when I left without a kiss. But I never complained, because for me that was what love meant, to endure. To love was to endure without demanding. To love was to protect, even without understanding what I was protecting. Daniel was growing up fast. He was quick, smart, and he took after her more than he took after me. I like to say that he had my hot blood, but sometimes I found myself staring at him too much, trying to find my own features. The shape of his nose, the way he laughed, the way he walked, and I couldn't always find them. But then he would hug me tightly, call me dad, and everything would disappear. I was a dad, and that was enough. Or at least, I thought it was enough, because the truth, The truth was there all along, hidden behind every smile of hers, behind the smell of fresh bread, behind the exaggerated care, the kiss without eye contact. But I would rather stay tired than suspicious, because a man who loves chooses not to see. And so I went on. One day after another, like someone pushing their heart with their stomach. But the silence, oh, the silence, it always comes back. And in that house, even with laughter, a pot on the stove and a child on the lap, the silence grew. I remember well the first time that really bothered me. It was a cloudy Tuesday, one of those days when the sun doesn't even try to come out. I got home early from work because the pain in my back wouldn't let me go on any longer. I thought I would get home and find only silence, the smell of bar soap in the air, and Marina humming something in the kitchen as she always did. But no. When I turned the corner, I immediately saw the scene. There he was, sitting on the wooden bench with his legs crossed, laughing out loud, laughing in a way that was too easy, and she was laughing along, with that laugh that I hadn't seen in a long time. He was the neighbor across the street, Roberto. About 5 years younger than me, he acted like a helpful guy, the kind who fixes the roof of the entire street and still apologizes for making noise. He always had his shirt open at the chest, an easy smile, and a confidence that bothered me and I pretended not to feel. He started by offering to help carry the bags of flour that arrived at the warehouse. Then he started showing up with pumpkin from his sister's farm, then with pieces of cheese, then with advice on everything. Before I knew it, he was already helping Marina wash the sidewalk, hang clothes, even season the beans. At first, I thought it was cute. I thought it was a neighborly gesture, one of those good old-fashioned friendships. And she always said, "Anselmo, he's just polite. He's being kind, that's all." And I believed him. Because that's what love is, right? Believing. To the point where you can't. But over time, his presence began to be too much. He was everywhere. He was at breakfast. I just came by to return the bowl, Marina. He was in the afternoon cleaning the fence. Since I had some time left, I decided to help. And even at night, sitting on the doorstep talking about the weather, the government, childhood, anything, as long as he was there. And she laughed. She laughed at jokes that she no longer listened to with me. She laughed with her eyes, with her head tilted back, as if he was saying the funniest things in the world. And the way she looked at him, it wasn't just any look. It was different. It had sparkle. It had time. It had commitment. I remember one night when I came home tired, covered in mud, and they were both in the kitchen. He had a cup in his hand. She had a dish towel thrown over her shoulder, talking softly. When I entered, they stopped. She was quick, as if she had been startled. He pretended not to notice, smiled and said, "Good evening, Anselmo. I just came to get some salt because I ran out." I smiled back, but inside, something broke. It was too much salt for someone who didn't season anything. After that, I started to notice more. There was a way she ran her hand through her hair when he was near, a looser laugh, an attention that was previously mine. And the worst thing, she seemed more alive when he was around, and more tired when I arrived. One day, I found a note in her apron pocket. It just said, "Today, 2 p.m. on the back." No name, no explanation. I asked what it was, and she said it was something from the butcher shop, an old message. And I accepted it. I pretended it was. I put the paper in my pocket and never spoke about it again, because there are questions we don't ask when we already know the answer. The other day, I came home from work and saw his shirt hanging on our clothesline. She said it had fallen in the backyard and she had washed it by mistake. "You know I'm absent-minded," she said, and I laughed. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. My heart was saying one thing, my head was screaming something else, but my voice, it was silent. I wasn't a stupid man. I knew how to add two and two. But those who love lie to themselves to keep living, because it's easier to imagine that the world is right than to accept that your home has become a strange place. And the worst part, We get used to it, to the doubt, to the silence, to the smell of perfume that isn't ours on the towel. We get used to it until we stop feeling it. But I trusted, because that was the only way to keep the little piece that was left. I trusted because deep down I still believed that she loved me, that all of that was just my tired mind inventing monsters where there was only routine. But over time, routine became an excuse. Love became a memory, and I became the man who smiled while another laughed louder in my house. And yet, I remained silent. Have you ever seen a man deceive himself so much just to avoid losing what he no longer had? I can still hear the sound of the respirator in the room, that artificial breath that went in and out of her chest as if it were trying to prolong what had already passed its time. The hospital room smelled of ether, dead flowers and silence, that heavy, dense silence that could not be broken even with a scream. Marina was no longer the woman who took care of the house, who laughed modestly, who adjusted the collar of my shirt before I left for the pottery. She was just skin and bones, wrapped in a white sheet, with her eyes as deep as empty wells. The disease came like everything that truly destroys, slowly, without fanfare. First, it was a cough here, a tiredness there, a weight loss that she attributed to poor nutrition. Then, tests, trips to and from the doctor, glances exchanged in silence, and the diagnosis that neither of us had the courage to repeat out loud. Cancer, and already advanced. When we love, we think the other person is eternal. Marina, for me, was that, eternal, even though I knew she had not been mine for a long time. She was never one to complain. She was in a lot of pain, and still tried to comb her hair before visitors. She was vain, proud, but in that last week she no longer tried to hide anything. The blue scarf no longer covered the hair that the treatment had taken away. The lavender scent that she used sparingly had already been replaced by the bittersweet smell of approaching death, and I could feel it on my skin, in my stomach, in my eyes. I went every day. I sat by her bed, held her thin hand, and told her things about Daniel, about the gossipy neighbor, about the orange tree that had dried up. And she just listened. Sometimes she gave a weak smile, other times she just blinked slowly. But that day, she spoke. Not in the voice I remembered. It was quieter, trembling, as if each syllable came from deep within her soul. She squeezed my hand very weakly, and her eyes sought mine with an urgency I had never seen before. And I knew, before she even opened her mouth, I knew something was coming, something big, something that you can't take back. Once it said, "Daniel," she began and stopped. Her throat went dry. Hers, mine. Time stopped there, in that moment, when there was no clock. "Daniel, he's not yours, Anselmo." For a second I thought I had heard wrong. I thought she was tired and was mixing up her words, but she kept going, looking at me with those repentant eyes that ask for forgiveness without having the courage to say the word. "He's Roberto's." And the world went dark. Not with noise, not with fury. With silence. A dry, cruel, cutting silence. As if the air had left the room and left only the truth there with me, staring me in the face. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't say anything. Because when the soul breaks, the body doesn't react. It only feels. I only felt. Everything passed before my eyes like an old, blurry movie. Daniel's birth, his first step, his first school notebook, the day he called me Dad for the first time. All of that suddenly seemed different, as if I had lived another man's life, as if I were just an extra in my own story. I remembered Roberto, his easy smile, his open shirt, the coffee in my kitchen, the shirt on the clothesline. I remembered everything, and how much I ignored, how much I kept quiet, how much I wanted to love so much that I accepted being deceived. She didn't cry. She just waited. She waited for me to say something, a pardon, a goodbye, anything. But I was empty. I felt like a wall collapsing inside without creating dust. My hands were shaking, hers weren't. She looked relieved, like someone who had finally let go of the weight they had carried for decades, like someone who looked at their own death and said, "Now it can come." I wanted to ask why. I wanted to scream. I wanted to get out of there. But I didn't do anything. I just sat down, took a deep breath, and held her hand tightly, not out of love, but out of respect. Because even though I was betrayed, I was the only one who stayed until the end. The nurse came in later. She changed the IV, adjusted the pillows, and looked at me with pity. Pity. And there I was, sitting like a man who had lost everything and couldn't tell anyone. Because who would understand? Who would hear that and not call me stupid, weak, and foolish? Marina slept that night. She slept forever, and I stayed, with her hand still warm in mine, and a hole so big in my chest that not even time could fill it. The truth came late, too late, and yet I never told Daniel, because deep down I was still his father, even if the world said I wasn't. The truth, when it arrives late, does not come as a relief. It comes as a sweet poison, which we swallow because we no longer have the strength to spit it out. That morning when she left, the hospital was too small for the silence that grew inside me. I walked to the parking lot without looking back. The nurse called my name, asked if I wanted to talk to someone, a psychologist, a priest, who knows. I shook my head. What to say? The woman I had loved for my entire life had just died, and with her went the rest of the lie that held up the ground I walked on. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I just walked down the stairs like someone carrying a body without a coffin, except that the body was mine. On the day of the funeral, all the neighbors showed up, even Roberto, in a suit, his eyes downcast. He placed a flower on the coffin and made the sign of the cross. He didn't say a word, and neither did I, because at that moment I didn't know who I was anymore, the widower, the betrayed one, the fool in the story, or the father of a son who didn't belong to me but who loved me as if he did. Daniel came to me and hugged me tightly. He said, "Dad, she loved you. We could see that." I shook my head. I didn't have the courage to say that it wasn't like that love sometimes has two faces, and one of them we don't see until it's too late. I could have told him right then and there, tell him the truth right away, let it all out, but I looked into his eyes and I couldn't, because the pain I felt was mine alone, and I thought it should continue to be so. In the days that followed, I often sat on the edge of the bed. The sheet still smelled of her, the faint scent of lavender mixed with the bar of soap she had always used. The sunken pillow still bore the imprint of her head. One day, I found a lock of hair stuck in the comb. I put it in a little box. I don't know why. Maybe out of attachment, maybe out of madness. But I kept it. I could have torn up the photos, burned the letters, torn the pictures off the wall. I could have screamed that I had been betrayed, that I had been deceived, that I had loved too much and received too little. But instead, I lowered my head and said in a low voice, alone in that room, "It's okay, Marina. I forgive you." It wasn't because of greatness. It wasn't because of purity of soul. It was because there was nowhere left to run. Because in a way it was still love, even rotten, even sick, even stained. And maybe I was also to blame, for having kept quiet so much, for not having asked, for having accepted the little as if it were everything. After her death, I had nightmares for weeks. I dreamed that she would knock on the door with Daniel in her arms and say, "He's yours, Anselmo. Please believe me." I would wake up sweating, panting, feeling a tightness in my chest as if I had run a marathon with my feet stuck to the ground. And deep down, I wanted to believe. I wanted to convince myself that in the end, it had all been a misunderstanding. That maybe she had lied on her deathbed because the fever had already taken over her mind. That maybe Daniel was mine, yes, but he wasn't. I knew. She looked me in the eyes when she said it, and eyes, oh, eyes don't lie. So I chose silence, because telling the truth wouldn't give me anything back. It would only destroy what I still had left. My son's love, his respect for me, the memory of a mother he loved sincerely, and even knowing everything, I wanted to protect him from it. Not for her, for him, because even if he hadn't come from my blood, Daniel left my life. He was raised by my hands, by my words, by my effort. Every fever I monitored, every notebook I bought, every piece of advice I gave, all of it was real. And I clung to it like someone clinging to a piece of wood in the open sea. There were days when I almost told him, almost. A conversation in the backyard, an open beer on the porch, a Sunday lunch when he said, "Dad, you are my example." I froze. The fork stopped halfway. My throat closed up, but I just smiled. I said, "Thank you, son." And I went to wash the dishes, hiding my tears in the foam. Maybe it was cowardice. Maybe, but it was also love. The kind of love that only old people understand, the kind that hides so as not to hurt, the kind that keeps quiet so as not to break what is. Still standing, she left and took the truth with her, but she left me with the weight of knowing and not being able to share. And that weight, I still carry it, every single day. Do you think that in my place, you would have had the courage to tell the truth? Even if it destroyed everything, there is a type of pain that has no name. It is not an open wound. It is not a fracture. It does not bleed. But it lives there between the rib and the memory. It is the type of pain that you learn to carry in silence like a stone that gets smoother with time, but never smaller. And it is this pain that I carry every time I hear Daniel call me Dad. He grew up with me. He learned to walk, holding my hand. He cried in the early hours of the morning, and it was my lap that calmed him down. His first steps, his first tooth, his first fall, everything happened with my eyes close by. I was the one who bathed him, who made airplanes with the spoon, who carried him on my shoulders so he could watch the band pass by on the street. There was never any doubt. There was never any distance. There was never any lack of love. I was his father. I on his father. But sometimes life rubs the truth in our faces in a cruel way. When he smiles, for example, there are days when it's my smile, wide, a little crooked, like my mother's. But other times, no. Other times, it's that smile I know well, that I've learned to hate. That smile that's too open, too confident, identical to my neighbor's. And that breaks me inside. It turns me upside down. It makes me want to run away and, at the same time, stay there and hug him until I forget. It has happened that we were laughing together, the two of us, telling old stories. And in the middle of the laughter, my chest froze, as if a shadow passed through me, because in that loud laugh, in that way of throwing my head back, I see the other. I see Roberto. I see the man who sat in my kitchen, who held my wife's hand in front of everyone, who said, "You two make a beautiful family." I see the traitor, and I see his reflection in my son. But Daniel is not to blame, and maybe that is what destroys me the most. He doesn't know. He never knew, and I chose to keep it that way. He hugs me tightly on special dates. He writes me notes on Father's Day in big letters. "Thank you for everything, Dad. You are my hero." He even brought me a cap that says "Best Dad in the World," and I wear it. I wear this cap with shame and pride, because on the outside, I am the man who won. But on the inside, I am the man who lost and pretended to win. His life was made by me. I was the one who taught him to cut the first piece of meat, to respect his elders, to open the door for the lady to pass. I was the one who nagged him when he had bad grades. I was the one who took him to the hospital when he had a high fever. He would call me from the payphone with a choked voice just to say he missed me and me. I said everything was fine, that the house was in order. But when I hung up, I cried with double the longing. That's what kills me. The love is true, mine, his. But the bond that unites us was sewn on top of a lie. And even if I didn't tell him, even if I chose to protect him, this truth screams. It screams every time he calls me Dad without knowing that his name carries another blood. I've looked at him sleeping on the couch in the living room after a family barbecue, with his mouth half open and his chest rising slowly, and I found myself thinking, this man is the greatest truth in my life, and also the greatest reminder of the lie that was given to me. There isn't a single birthday that I don't think, what if he knew? What if I knew when I was little? Would he still love me like that? Would he call me Dad with the same affection? Or would he see me as just an old man who was deceived, who took care of someone else's child as if it were his own? This doubt eats away at me inside, because at the same time that I am whole in him, I know that he was also built with pieces that are not mine, and there are days when this poisons me. But then he arrives, calls me my old man, hugs me tightly, says I'm the best father in the world, and I swallow it all. I swallow the bitter taste, the old pain, the other's name. I swallow, because even if he hasn't left me, he is my life. 40 years. It seems like a lifetime, and maybe it was, just a fake lifetime. 40 years looking into my son's eyes and smiling as if everything was okay. 40 years sitting at the table at Christmas, listening to him call me Dad, thanking me for the presents, the scoldings, the advice, and smiling back as if there wasn't a scream stuck in my throat inside me. Time passes differently when we hide a truth. It moves slowly on the inside and quickly on the outside. On the outside, I was the grandfather who told jokes at Sunday lunch, the neighbor who swept the sidewalk early, the proud father who showed the photo of his son in his wallet. But on the inside, I was just a shard of silence. Everyday life became like a theater. Every gesture was rehearsed, every word weighed before leaving my mouth. Sometimes I would say "my son" out loud, just to remind myself that that title was still mine, even if the blood wasn't. Sometimes I would touch his shoulder, and without meaning to, I would feel the other's bone structure, the way he walked, his loud laugh, even his habit of scratching his chin when he thought too much. Everything was his, Roberto's, the man who stole me from the inside. But I couldn't speak. I shouldn't have. I didn't want to, because the world I built on top of that lie was the only one I had, and you don't destroy a home out of pride when you love too much. There was a day when I went to the bathroom just to cry quietly, with the water running in the sink so that no one could hear. There was a night when I slept facing her side after a kiss on the forehead, and I cried in silence, looking at the ceiling, wondering if she had been able to love both of us at the same time, me and him, or if I was just the shield to hide the mistake. She died without asking for forgiveness. She only left behind a burden. She only spilled the truth and left, and the poison remained in me. I was left with a bitter taste, with the doubt that bites, with the desire to ask, and with the fear of the answer. I was buried with her, but I'm alive. 40 years, and I remember everything, every birthday, every diploma, every hug, every kiss on the cheek that smelled of baby sweat. I remember the day he became a father for the first time, and he looked at me and said, "Now I understand what you feel." And I smiled, and it hurt, because he doesn't understand, he will never understand, because this feeling of being the father of someone who doesn't carry your blood, only I know that. But I accepted it. I chose to love more than to hate, even if every family photo made my smile crooked, even if every time someone said, "He looks just like you," I swallowed the urge to run away, because this secret became a part of me. It grew with me and grew old by my side. And you know what's worse? The world turns and forgets. People leave, life goes on. But this kind of pain doesn't go away. It changes clothes, changes appearance, even changes location on the chest. But it stays. It always stays. I wanted to tell him so many times. I wanted to leave a letter, a recording, anything. But every time I tried, I saw his face as a boy, the way he would squeeze my hand when he was scared, The way he would say, "Dad, stay with me a little longer," and then I would shut up, because I didn't want to take away from him the father he believed he had, and I didn't want to be remembered as a broken man, even though I was. 40 years smiling in photos with a hole in my chest. 40 years being someone's hero, while inside I felt like an imposter. 40 years swallowing tears that tasted like bile, with my soul shrunken, with tears in my eyes in silence. And now, at the end of the road, I just wanted to breathe easy, but I can't, because her secret has become my inheritance, and there's no will that can take that away from me. I've written letters. Some of them were whole, others didn't go past the first line. I scribbled in an old notebook that I kept in my dresser drawer where no one touches it. I'd start with "son," and then the pen would fail. Not for lack of ink, but for too much pain. It was as if each word I tried to write pulled a part of me along with it. I wrote and erased, I rewrote, and in the end I always tore it all up and threw it away, because the truth, once told, can't be taken back. And I still don't know if I'm ready for it all to fall apart. I've rehearsed conversations too, many. Some while he was washing the dishes and I was drying them, others at the gate when he came to visit me and would stand there, leaning against me, talking about the children, work, life. I would look at his face, that face that I know like the back of my hand, every wrinkle, every sign, every gesture inherited from me, even if it's not mine. And I would think, this is it. Speak. But my mouth would dry up, my tongue would feel heavy, and I would swallow. Again, I would swallow as I had swallowed for 40 years, because the urge to tell him comes like a wave, strong, violent, impossible to hold back. I want to scream. I want to get this out of me like someone pulling out a thorn that's been stuck there for decades. I want to tell him that I was deceived, that I lived a lie, that I loved a child that wasn't mine, and I still do, that I was betrayed by the person who slept next to me, that I was made a fool, a puppet, a shield. But then comes the fear, not the usual fear, the kind we feel when we hear thunder or when we run out of money. It's a deeper fear, fear of losing what little we have left. Because if I tell him, Daniel might hate me. He might look at me with eyes that will never be the same again. He might think I lied, that I was an accomplice, that I deceived him too, and that, I can't stand that. I've found myself alone many times, sitting on the porch, imagining his reaction. Dad, why didn't you tell me before? And I didn't have an answer. Dad, this changes everything. And I knew that it really does change, that it really does destroy, because there's no way a child can stay the same after knowing that he's not his own child, that he was raised by someone who in practice only loved but never gave birth. What if I keep quiet? What if I keep quiet as I always have? I'll continue to be the deceived man, the fool in the story, the fool who accepted everything so as not to lose anything, but I'll also continue to be the father he loves, the grandfather he respects, the old man he visits with joy. This is what tears me apart. Any choice hurts. Telling hurts. Keeping quiet hurts too. There is no way out without a wound. Sometimes I look at Marina's picture on the bookshelf, that serene look as if she had never done anything wrong, and I feel anger. I feel love. I feel everything together. She left me with this burden, with this unlit bomb. And now I'm the one who has to decide whether to explode or bury myself even deeper. The truth burns me inside, but Daniel's peace calms me on the outside. He comes, hugs me, calls me Dad, laughs at the same old jokes. He tells me that I am the example of the man he wants to be. And I think, would I still say that if I knew? At night, before I go to sleep, I pray. I no longer pray for myself, I pray for him. I ask God to help me carry this through to the end. I ask for wisdom, or maybe just courage, to decide whether this secret should be revealed or whether it should die with me. Because sometimes loving is also protecting from the truth, and sometimes protecting is the same as lying. Do you think it's possible to love someone so much, to the point of choosing silence, even knowing that it will suffocate you for the rest of your life? Today, I understand that the truth has a price, a high one that you don't pay with money, but with pieces of your soul. The truth destroys, rebuilds, and sometimes it just destroys. It doesn't come to console, it comes to tear down veils, tear down walls, open wounds that we pretended were healed. The truth is like a knife. Whoever gives it away gets cut too. But silence also takes its toll, and it takes its toll in daily installments. A look that we look away from, a word that we swallow, a hug that shakes inside. Silence becomes a wall between you and the world, and between you and yourself. And that's what I lived, a whole life walking between the truth and silence without knowing which hurt more. Marina, she lied, she deceived me. She made me her shield, her carpet, her fool. But she also made me a father. She gave me a boy who became a man under my gaze. She gave me afternoons with the smell of baked bread, nights of fever and affection, mornings with the laughter of a child. And that, no one can take that away from me. She hurt me, yes. She left a mark on me, but even so, even knowing everything, I still loved her until the very last second, because love, the love we feel for someone, doesn't depend only on what the other person did. Sometimes love is a stubborn decision. It's you looking at all the bad things and still choosing to stay. And I stayed. I stayed because there was a boy in the crib, a boy who looked at me as if I was everything he needed, a boy who didn't know about the lie, but who called me Dad with such truth that I started to believe that I really was. Daniel may not be my son by blood. I know that. Every time I look at him and see the reflection of another man, my chest tightens. But when he calls me Dad, when he hugs me on Father's Day with those strong arms and says, "I love you, man," my heart knows he is mine, not because of what runs through my veins, but because of what we built, what we shared, what we survived. And maybe this is truer than any DNA, because being a father is not about planting the seed. It is about watering it every day. It is about cleaning up the mess, holding the fever, scolding, teaching how to fall and how to get up. It is about loving without demanding anything in return. It is about being there even when everything tells you to leave. Today, with my hands calloused by time and my heart full of scars, I look back and see that I wasn't perfect, that maybe I was weak or foolish or negligent, but I was present. And that, my friend, that's worth more than any surname on paper. In the end, we all have wounds that no one sees, secrets that weigh more than suitcases, loves that hurt. But life is made of choices. And I chose to love. I chose to continue. I chose to raise a child as if he were mine, because for me, he always was. And now that my days are shorter than they are long, I leave this story here, as if lifting a weight off my chest, as if writing something I never had the courage to say, because maybe someone on the other side will understand, because maybe someone is going through something similar and needs to know that they are not alone. And if you've listened this far, tell me, do you think that in the end, blood is worth more than love? Telling this hurt, but it hurt even more to hide it for so long. It's not easy to open up after so many years of being quiet. It's not easy to say out loud what only the pillow knew. But today, after everything, I feel like I've lifted a weight that had been weighing me down for a long time. You listened to me until the end, and that changes everything for me, because sometimes what we need most is not an answer. It's just someone who listens without looking away, who understands the pain, even if they haven't experienced it. Just the fact that you're there, listening to these words with an open heart, makes me feel less alone. Comment here with the word true if you have also ever kept something for fear of losing what little was left, because there are things that only those who live in silence understand, And maybe by reading your comment, someone else will find courage too. Leave a like, follow the channel. Maybe someone else needs to hear this. Maybe someone else is right now, at this very moment, swallowing an old cry that never had a name. And if this story touched you, then it was worth it. Now take a deep breath, because what comes next will leave you speechless. In the video that is appearing on the screen, there is a confession that will bring tears to your eyes, without you even realizing it. It is a sad, dramatic story of pain and betrayal, a story that shows you how the people we love can be cruel. But regardless of that, how we can survive this cruelty and heal ourselves and learn to love ourselves.